Hello, welcome to the Health In Show, an affiliate program of Homeopathy World Community. You've come to the right place to tune in and participate with your comments and questions. Love is the greatest healer of all, but sometimes, in order to change our emotions, we must take action in other spheres of our lives. We speak with experts in alternative and complementary health fields and hope you will benefit in some small or great way. Remember, you are wherever your thoughts are. Make sure your thoughts are where you want to be.
Good day, everyone. Wherever you are in the world tuning in to the Health In Show, we have a special program. I'm thinking of it as soul food because we're always talking to someone, an expert in the field, about either the environment or what we put into our body and or what we take out of our body. So today we're going to be speaking with Rabbi Yisroel Cotlar of Cary, North Carolina. And I consider him my spiritual leader, and maybe you're going to learn today why I honor him so much. Him as a husband, a good husband, and a wonderful father, and also a wonderful brother in the other people in the community, and also as a spiritual leader. Rabbi Cotlar was born and raised in Houston and actively participated in the Chabad outreach in the area, and he studied in many yeshivot in the United States, the UK, and Canada. He spent 2 years in Australia teaching, guiding, and mentoring Jewish teens. And you know, when you make a connection, they carry on for life, so these communications last. He then returned to the United States, where he received his rabbinical ordination from the Central Chabad Rabbinical Court in Brooklyn, New York. And as I said, he is my spiritual leader, and I hope you can gain some sage advice today or just get in tune with yourself. So we're going to be talking about what holds us back from change and how we can change. I thought it was interesting, Rabbi, my regular intro was about change.
It was.
It really was perfect lead in for today.
Well, it's a pleasure to be on the program today. Thank you so much for the invitation. And yeah, that's what we'll be talking about today. What we can do to motivate ourselves more and change. What is it that gets in the way? What can we tell ourselves to help overcome those obstacles, as well as when to try to fight a problem and when to come to terms with it, when to try to change things and when to accept them as they are. So I'll be discussing very general principles today, but these apply to so many different sorts of situations. Certainly on your show, you often discuss health and lifestyle, and that might be one area of change that people are thinking about. What we often discuss in our conversations together is personal character development, overcoming bad habits, that sort of change. It can also be change in relationships and jobs. But finally, change in perspective, changing your opinion about something, looking at something differently at a certain point in your life. So these are all the different sorts of manifestations of the discussion that we're going to have today. And I want to begin with the sorts of things that can get in the way of change. And the first often is pride. It isn't easy to change because often people feel what you're essentially saying is, I was wrong before. And that's not something easy to do. Yesterday was a minor Jewish holiday by the name of Lag BaOmer. And one of the heroes of the day was a Jewish sage who was called Rabbi Akiva. And the Talmud, our oral tradition, tells us a lot about this sage, Rabbi Akiva. And it tells us a story that until he was 40 years old, he had never studied any of the Jewish teachings before. In fact, he did not know how to read. He did not know the difference between an aleph and a bet, which would be the difference between A and B. And at a certain point in his life, he was motivated to change. And the Talmud then tells us a story that at that point he was 40 years old, and he went to a classroom of 6 and 7-year-olds and began studying the alphabet together with them. Now, normally the Talmud doesn't get descriptive in its stories. It just tells us the facts. It tells us he was 40 years old when he first began studying, and then he went on to become a great sage. Why was it necessary to tell us this little tidbit about him studying in the classroom with 6 and 7-year-olds? And I believe the answer is to show us that any change takes courage. It takes humility. For him, it meant saying that I am willing to sit down, even with 6 and 7-year-olds, because I know this is what I want to do right now. I think in our lives, we don't have to quite do things like that. But nonetheless, any change is difficult from the perspective of declaring that I was wrong until now, and now I'm embracing a new reality. I find it very interesting how in politics today, when a candidate or someone already in office changes a position, that's seen in very negative light. They are flip-flopping, they're not real. And I never understood that. If anything, the ability to change is a strength in character, not weakness. We should not be the same people today as we were yesterday. We shouldn't believe A, B, and C today just because yesterday I believed A, B, and C. We're always supposed to be challenging ourselves and making decisions based on the experiences that are going on in our life today. So the notion that a person changes, whether at age 30, 60, or 80, whether it's in a lifestyle, whether it's in a perspective, an opinion, or belief, whether it's overcoming a certain trait of theirs, that is a strength, that is not a weakness. That is something to be proud of. That is something that shows just how strong of a man or woman we are, that we can embrace that change and we don't allow our ego to get in the way. So that, Debbie, is certainly the first component, recognizing that it takes courage and having the humility to do so.
Thank you for that beautiful introduction. And I don't know, are we going to just go off the cuff or are we going to go by the prepared PowerPoint? What would you like to do? Because, you know, when you start speaking, of course, you're going to initiate questions or comments from all of the listeners, and they can call in to 919-518-9773 in the United States or via computer at Computers 2K Voice. So rather by Skype. So Skype is Computers 2K Voice and telephone 919-518-9773. And we welcome your comments and questions. So would you like to do the PowerPoint or you just want to talk?
Well, I'll talk, and along the way we'll have a few slides. But I do want any questions both from you as well as from the audience at any point in the conversation. So we want this to be interactive. So Feel free to ask away throughout the conversation.
Okay, can I make a comment then? This is something that we often mention when we're in congregation talking together and you're talking about being able to change your mind. And always one of the women perk up and say, women have a right to change their mind, and they often do. So it's a positive thing in light of what you just said.
I think it's us men that need to be able to admit that more often, having the humility of saying, yeah, I was wrong. And here's the other piece. It doesn't mean that you were wrong. I think that might be something that gets in the way sometimes of embracing a change. You're essentially saying, I was wrong. And you need not look at it that way based on the experiences you had in the past and what you were told and what was going on in your life at that point. You made a calculated decision to embrace that reality, have that behavioral pattern, have that belief, have that opinion. But now things have changed. You've evolved. You're looking at things differently. You were taught something differently, and now you are taking on a new perspective. It doesn't mean you were wrong before. On the contrary, you can take everything that you've already accumulated in your knowledge and in your behavior and just shed new light on it with change. So I think being able to tell yourself, it doesn't mean I'm admitting I made a mistake. Rather, I have the courage to now have a new perspective.
Right,
so
with an additional information or the parameters which you're going to speak about today. So why don't I just put up the first slide just so that people know this is What Gets in the Way of Change, Rabbi Yisroel Cotlar. Today is May 19, 2014. I forgot to mention that. And we have the quote from Mahatma Gandhi, "Be the change that you wish to see in the world." Okay, and we also have our regular disclaimer, which is this is for educational purposes only. And okay, so now the next, and I already did give a little background for you, so we're going to go to the next slide. And change again. Everyone thinks of changing the world, but no one thinks of changing himself. That's Leo Tolstoy. And so you might want to make a comment about that.
That is a very beautiful quote. We are always trying to change others. We're trying to change our family, our community. I want to share a quick anecdote that a rabbi once said. He lived in the Polish town of Kotsk. And he said, when I was young, I wanted to change the world, but then I soon realized I was unable to do so. So I realized I'll just work on changing my town. Then I saw that too was very difficult. So let me try to change my family. And saw that too wasn't working. So I decided to change myself. But when I changed myself, I had an impact on my family, and that in turn influenced the community, and that can change the world. And I think that's a very powerful and telling quote. And I should note that by no means this person was influential. He did change the world. But certainly he did so in a manner where it came from self. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that later on, what to try to change and what not to try to change. But everyone is always talking about changing others, and it always begins with self. So if pride is the first thing that gets in the way often of change. The second is a person saying, I can't change. Truly believing that it is what it is. This is who I am. And I don't have the ability to change. And Debbie, if I may, I want to spend just a few moments talking about that idea based on some of the values in Judaism and Jewish tradition. Many people might believe that we are slaves to certain things. It might be our genetic makeup. It might be circumstances. It might be the family we were brought up into. But for various reasons, a person could think that we are really just a complex program. We are just forced to respond to circumstances that come our way in a very set way based on who we are and how we grew up. And fundamental to Judaism is the notion that is not true, and we truly have freedom of choice in a very deep part of us. And the only question is whether or not we harness that energy inside of us or not. But the notion that this is who I am because this is how I was born, or this is who I am because this is how I was brought up, Judaism challenges that belief and says, no, we are free. Judaism believes that there are really two, we can put it this way, Judaism will say that God is free in the sense that God doesn't have to respond in a specific way. God is free to choose how to act in creation. And we, mankind, being created in the image of God, also has that characteristic. We also have that freedom, unlike the animal kingdom or other creations that primarily run on instinct and are forced to respond to a particular situation in a particular way. We, being created in the image of God, have that freedom inside of us if we only know how to use it. So I think the second idea here is really believing that, yes, I can change. I'm not a slave to my circumstances. And if you don't mind for a moment going to the PowerPoint, I want to show just how really in the Bible this idea is emphasized. The first Jew is Abraham. And the first thing in the Bible that God tells Abraham is leave. God tells Abraham, go for yourself, leave your land, leave your birthplace, leave your father's house, and go to the land that I will show you. This is the very first verse in the Torah where Abraham, the first Jew, has any sort of revelation from God. So this is an important verse. So I highlighted just a few of the phrases in that verse. Why is it so dramatic? Why couldn't this verse just say, leave your home and go to the land that I will show you, which ends up being Israel? Why the drama? Why leave your land? Why leave your birthplace? Leave your father's house? These words are not extra. These are not just descriptive. This is telling us a powerful message. And Jewish tradition puts it so beautifully. People might think that we are slaves. And throughout history, there have been different philosophers that have come across as saying that we are slaves to something. If you don't mind showing the next PowerPoint, please. Certainly, man is a product of social forces. The ruling class, that is what molds us. That is what forms us. As a response to that notion, we are told, leave your land. Just because there are certain beliefs of your land or of the ruling class, that need not dictate to you who you are. Certainly others came across and said that we are just based upon our biological drives, what we call today DNA. To that, Abraham is told, leave the circumstances of your birth. You can rise above that as well. And as well, we are influenced by our childhood, how we grew up. To that, Abraham is told, leave your father's house. Now, by no means am I suggesting that we are not formed by social forces. We are not formed by our DNA or our upbringing. Certainly, nature and nurture both form us in significant ways. But what we are arguing is that notwithstanding all of that, we can still rise above that, because those are just external trappings that cover a very free place inside of us, in our soul, in that place that is created in the image of God. So this is what Abraham was told, and we are all told to really be like Abraham in being always in the driver's seat, and our lives should not be dictated by anyone else. Another quote on that next slide, Debbie, please.
Slide number 6?
Yes, thank you.
Do you want me to interrupt you at any point?
Please do.
I know you could probably just flow with it because I hear it all coming out so beautifully. As I saw the previous slides of to leave, lech lecha, to go from your land, your birthplace, your father's house, and everything, in one of the things, to a place I will show you, is number 1, going to an unknown. So there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of emotions, there's a lot of connection and ties to who you are, your identity, what you've been, what you've learned. And now you're going to be taken to a new place that you've never seen or heard or nothing, and without any knowledge, without
that takes
knowing.
courage. That takes courage, and that takes humility. We are creatures of habit, and we like getting into a specific comfort zone, but it's often those comfort zones that can constrain us and keep us away from being free. So absolutely, the place that I will show you is a very significant part of the verse, as is the first couple words where he is told, go for yourself, or more literally, go towards yourself, leaving your land, leaving your birthplace. Often people are afraid that if I leave my comfort zone, who will I be left with? And the verse here suggests, no, you'll actually find yourself. In leaving all these external trappings, you'll actually be traveling deeper and deeper into yourself, harnessing that place inside of you that is truly free.
And also, my mind is meditating all morning on what we were going to say. And by this leaving action, I kept thinking of it as being very holy in the way that when we separate, if we're surrounded by everything, then we cannot see ourselves. But if we separate ourselves out, then we will be able to see ourselves maybe more clearly, to know really our most holiest part of self.
Absolutely. We do not realize how immersed we are in messages all over ourselves. And I'm sure you speak about that a lot in the program here. So many of the things we take for granted are all the messages that the media or others are telling us. And when you are immersed in something and you are not separate from it, then you are not able to harness that freedom inside of you to decide, is this good for me or is this not good for me? So being able to be objective requires taking a step out and leaving that place. A beautiful, beautiful perspective on that.
Okay, slide 6.
And do you want to read, Debbie?
Oh, thank you. This is like our lunch and learn that we have every week, and the people who attend all get to do the reading. So if anybody wants to call in and read, please be my guest. This is called Lech Lecha in Hebrew. It means leave behind you all that makes human beings predictable, unfree, able to blame others and evade responsibility. Shall I continue?
Do a few more slides here. It's going to summarize this idea.
Okay. Lech Lecha in this sense means you must be prepared to take for yourself a lonely, oftentimes lonely journey. Go by yourself. To be a child of Abraham is to have the courage to be different, to challenge the idols of the age, whatever the idols and whichever the age. Lech Lecha, also in an era of polytheism, many gods, that meant seeing the universe as the product of a single creative will, and therefore not meaningless, but coherent and meaningful. In an era of slavery, it meant refusing to accept the status quo in the name of God. Instead, individuals must challenge the existing state of affairs. And when power was worshipped, you can attribute all of these to the contemporary world too. When power was worshipped, changing the status quo meant constructing a society that cared for the powerless, the widow, the orphan, and the stranger. During centuries when the masses of mankind were steeped in ignorance, challenging the times meant honoring education as the key to human dignity and creating schools to provide universal literacy. Oh, that just brought to mind the missing girls. They were not allowed to go to school, and they were taken away. When war was the test of manhood, it meant striving for peace. In ages of radical individualism, like today, the me generation, and doing selfie. I'm really good on selfies. It means knowing that we are not what we own, but what we share, not what we buy, but what we give. That there is something higher than appetite and desire, namely the call that comes to us as it came to Abraham from outside ourselves, summoning us to make a contribution to the world.
So that text actually from the former chief rabbi of Britain, Rabbi Sachs, is definitely a loaded text, and we can probably spend a lot of time just on those ideas. But going back to the discussion here, step number 2 is recognizing that I am not a victim. I can leave. Just because this was the way I was yesterday does not mean that is the way I am today, whether it's an addiction, whether it is a bad habit, whether it's looking at life through a certain lens, a lifestyle change. We are being the true human when we embrace freedom to change. So if number one is the humility to change, number two would be just knowing that this is inherent to who we are, that notwithstanding everything that has happened to us, we can rise above that. But that takes recognizing all the things around us as being external. In Jewish tradition, there's a word for that. The word is Mitzrayim. We should have had this on the PowerPoint perhaps, but the word means Egypt. Just like the ancient Israelites were in slavery by the Egyptians, in our own lives, we each have something else that is our Egypt, our Mitzrayim. And we need to identify it. What is it that is holding me back from being truly free? Is it an addiction? Is it the media? Is it a relationship? Is it my job? What is the Mitzrayim that is keeping me back from being truly free? And the good thing about identifying it as a Mitzrayim, that's a way of saying that this is not the real me. The real me is free. I just have to be able to overcome this. And the more we paint it as the real me versus a Mitzrayim, the easier it is to overcome that challenge. If we look at it as just an argument this way or an argument that way, I should eat this, I shouldn't eat this, this will make me fat, this is healthier, this is unhealthier. Often it's easy to one day have a convincing argument and the next day, be swayed in the other direction. But once we look at it as this is the real me, and this is something that is just getting in the way of Mitzrayim, or better, this is right and this is wrong. When we make it about a moral argument, good, bad, right, wrong, the real me, Mitzrayim, at that point it's that much easier to harness that freedom of choice inside of us. I'll tell you a remarkable story that happened to actually the previous leader in our movement. This is in the 1930s. And he was at the doctor. And the doctor was telling him news that it's coming out that smoking is not very good for you. And the doctor, this is probably early, many years ago, the 1930s, where it's just coming out that it has all sorts of negative things that it can bring to a person's health. And the doctor is just sharing the latest news with this individual. Again, a great rabbi, the leader of the Chabad movement, previous rabbi. And they continue the discussion. They finish the examination. And afterwards, the doctor hands this rabbi a cigarette. I guess at that time, that was a cordial thing to do. He handed him a cigarette. And the rabbi responds, "No, I'm sorry, I don't smoke." And he says, "What do you mean? Everyone knows, Rabbi, that you regularly smoke." And he says, "Well, I did up until today, but based upon what you just told me, no, I'm not going to smoke anymore." And that was it. This rabbi, from that point on, never smoked again. And I find this story remarkable in so many ways, how it's possible in just one moment to change like that. But he felt now that it's a moral argument. It is not good for my health. I have a godly responsibility to take care of my body. All right, that means I'm no longer going to do this. The smoking is a Mitzrayim. I need to be healthy. I need to do the godly thing. I'm going to stop. And by wording it that way, he was able to summon the energy, harness that energy inside of himself to overcome an obstacle that we know how difficult it is to overcome today. But the advantage of wording it this way instead of in many other ways allows us to summon that energy.
Do we have a caller? No? Oh, we don't have a caller. Okay, but Rabbi, I read a lot of articles. Yes, I am addicted to the media. Unfortunately, that's one of the things I need to leave. My Mitzrayim is media news. In some of the articles, and a lot of them recently, the psychologists and psychiatrists are telling us that when we get a new piece of information that challenges our belief system, we dig our heels in even more and we stick to our guns and we don't change. So in order to accept information that will challenge every single thing that we believe, and the pleasure factor of smoking or whatever it might be that we're doing, even though it's harmful to ourselves, I still need a little more help I need a little bit more help of how to change. I have to change my surroundings. That's one thing for sure. But the influencers are so strong, and my own personal belief system is so strong that I don't know that if one day I could do this and the next day I could do that.
I don't think everyone is capable of a story like that, changing smoking in one day. That was a story with a very spiritual giant. But I think stories like that show us in our little way it is possible. It doesn't mean it's going to happen overnight, and it doesn't mean we're never going to slip up. But in our own way, in our own small battles, it's possible. And I think the first step is recognizing that it is a Mitzrayim. Like you mentioned earlier, when you are immersed in it and you don't call it out for what it is harder to leave it. But if a person has A, the humility, and B, the recognition that is a Mitzrayim, then I think those are two important ingredients. Again, like you said, not just to dig your heels in deeper and fight back stronger, but really embrace the change. But it takes humility. It takes deep humility. But you can't do it to someone else. One of a powerful story that happened, there was someone that I know that was introducing their rabbi to someone else. And they said, here's my rabbi, and I want to tell you, this rabbi is really special. He changed my life. And quickly the rabbi responds and says, I did not change anything. You changed your life. I might have said the right thing at the right time, and you happen to be there, and that's fantastic. There were dozens of other people at the same time, and it had no effect on them. You decided internally you were willing to change, and then when that news, that piece of information came your way, you were receptive. You changed it and not me. And I think the same thing is true in all of our changes. Are we willing to change it? If we are, at that point in time, when the news comes our way, the information comes our way, the inspiration comes our way, then we'll change. But if we are not open, then no matter how inspiring, as you said, it will just lend us to just, fight back stronger. So again, the openness comes first. Then when the information comes, we can be willing to change. But in the particular story I shared, this was a spiritual giant who did not have much of that ego, did not have much of, this is who I am and I cannot change. And therefore, when the information did come, they were so willing to change. And sadly, we live in a time where people are so stuck often to their opinions and afraid to concede, afraid to be seen as someone who went off the deep end or as a flip-flop or any of the other terms that we have, and that openness is not there.
Right. And I think a key word is readiness. And how do you prepare yourself to be ready, to be open for information that might blow your mind, that might say, oh my gosh. And I also feel that we are constantly getting little tiny messages every day, little signals, little, I don't feel comfortable here, or why is this happening to me there? And then oftentimes it does take that enormous crisis point, accident, diagnosis, whatever it might be. And at that point, it's a shock to the system that will kind of crack the shell and say, oh my gosh, I cannot delay. I cannot wait anymore. It's something that I must do this change, whether it's your diet or going for exercise or sunlight or whatever it might be.
You worded that very well, because if those little steps are not there, then even when that big thing happens, you may not be in a state to change. But when you're always considering it, and you're back and forth, that at least allows you, when that big thing happens, to embrace change. Of course, what we want in our lives is not to have, God forbid, the tragedy or the thing that wakes us up or shakes us out. We want to be able to do it to ourselves. In a way, we're blessed with the fact that every morning when we wake up, it's a new day. It's very interesting that we are made in a way that requires sleep. I'm sure as you wish that you didn't have to sleep as much, and you could be so much more effective if you didn't sleep. And for that note, imagine what life would be like if we did not have to sleep at all. That being said, the fact that we go to sleep at night and wake up the next day, that also is a gift. That also is the ability to have a fresh start. And when we wake up in the morning, to truly say I'm who I am today, not just because this is who I was yesterday. So I think the morning and the other times in the year, the New Year's or the other special occasions throughout the year, allow us better perspective on change. But again, it takes the openness and the willingness.
I have some comments in the chat here.
Sure.
One from Yitzhak Ben, probably Shmuel. All people have challenges. Overcoming challenges often makes us stronger. Change for selfish purposes is not always good. So that is he put a question mark to that, I think. Change for selfish purposes is not always good. Do you have an answer for that?
Certainly, what is inspiring the change is an important question. Often we can change because of pressures that are not good. Change for the worse. Change because there's an external pressure coming our way that is challenging us to, whether it's to fit in with the norm or whether it's to give up something very important to us for something more superficial. So absolutely, we have to know that not always is change a good thing. Yeah, it's an easy catchword, change, but we always have to challenge, where is this coming from? Why am I doing this? And a good litmus test, again, is it coming from an external or internal place? And at the end of the day, what is going to be the result of this change? If I am successful with this change, where will it take me? And if it's going to result in selfishness, being a worse parent, a worse spouse, a worse person, then certainly that's not a good one. So I'm happy you asked that question. I think before we get carried away with inspiration, we need to paint that picture. Best case scenario, if I do change, I am successful in this, how will I look like? And
that flies in the face of the original quote that you're going into the unknown. You don't know what you're going to look like. So if you can envision what this change is going to do to you, then, and you see, it's sort of like a game of chess, you know, right, when you're taking these moves and these steps, and can you see that far ahead to know what it's going to?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you can and sometimes you can't, but when you can't, it's specifically then that you need to always be mindful that any change is dangerous ground. And now you have to be on alert and not to be swept up in emotion, but always be head over heart, mind over emotion. And to really, during those first couple of days of the change, ask yourself the question again, where is this leading me? Because often when you're swept up in a change, you can be swept up in the emotions and lose the objectivity. So yes, it is important to analyze, I think, relationships as a big litmus test. When I'm going through the change, what is happening to my relationships, better or worse? And hopefully if you ask yourself that question in the earlier stages, it will be much easier to not get, to be able to take a step back and return to that place if in fact it was leading you to a negative place. So it's nice to have those litmus tests to ask ourselves. And I think relationships is a good one. I'm being so caught up into this pursuit of change that I'm now no longer there for my children or my spouse or whatnot. Well, certainly that's not leading you in a good place.
Right. Just change for the sake of change is not true change.
Right. And that leads us to one of the quotes I was going to get to a little bit later. I'm going to hold that thought and we'll get to it later. Change just for the sake of change. When you're trying to really ignore a deeper reality and you hope that this minor change is going to bring the salvation that you're looking for. But let's put that on the side for a moment. A few other small tips I've always felt is important is when that inspiration does come, you need to act on it, and you need to act on it now. In the story I just said about quitting to smoke, I think it's significant that at the end of that doctor visit, he was handed a cigarette. He might have already made up his mind that he was going to stop smoking, but often what we can do is, all right, as of tomorrow or as of next week, I don't want to, I don't want to right now start, or I was offered a cigarette by this kind doctor. I shouldn't turn it down. So I think it is significant that in the story, immediately he said no. Because when we have that inspiration, we have to act on it right away. And it's that first and second time that helps cement that way of looking at life in our mind. So
and somehow God provides the opportunity for you to take action immediately.
Right.
I think I'll start my diet tomorrow or Monday or after the holidays or whatever.
Yeah. And it's specifically that moment that really cements that inside of you. I was deeply inspired by an individual who recently passed away, and I've shared this story with you, Debbie, before. But his change was actually taking the Sabbath, the Jewish Shabbat, and not working on it. And it was a change that he felt was necessary for many reasons, for his family, for religious reasons. But it was only going to happen if he made that determination, I'm not going to work on the Shabbat. So the day came when he made that pledge. And it wasn't but the next Saturday afterwards, or the Friday afterwards, that he gets this call and a very lucrative business opportunity if you would accept it on that next Saturday. And he's like, I can't believe it. I just made this pledge. It's been months since such an opportunity has come my way. How could it be coming to me right now? And obviously it was a big challenge, but he said, no, my word is my word, and I'm going to keep to it. And he did. And I believe it was that Sabbath, that Shabbat, that deeply cemented that resolution inside of him, after which it was that much easier to take off any further Shabbats. So when that first opportunity comes our way, we have to realize this is a critical one. This is an important one. Let's not postpone the resolution until a more conducive opportunity. Again, the fact that it's conducive is reflective on it's not a real change. If it was easy, it wouldn't be a change. And it's specifically at those difficult times that you are able to cement that activity inside of you.
Is it a covenant with yourself in some way? Is it a commitment to yourself in some way? But you also, in the end, if you don't manage to adhere to it, forgive yourself. It's very complicated.
Yeah. You certainly at the beginning have to have a zero tolerance policy when it comes to many of these changes, because when you're given a little bit, and that's not good. It's interesting, in Jewish law, there's a term called modeh v'miktzat, which means admitting partially. And once one admits partially, the whole litigation changes. Simple example, if someone runs up to, person A comes up to person B, and she says, you owe me $100, and the person denies it, says absolutely not. Well, there's nothing doing. You can't even bring them to court. You don't require the person on the defense to make an oath that they don't owe the money. They just denied it, black and white. The burden of proof obviously falls on the person that is bringing the claim. If, however, the person says, well, you're right that I did once borrow $100, But a few months ago, I paid back $50. Well, at that point now, who does the burden of proof fall on? The person who claims they have paid the $50. They have already admitted partially that's a game changer in Jewish law. Every law has a physical and spiritual component. The spiritual component to that is once you do give in a little bit, it is a game changer. It's that much easier to overcome the obstacle when you have that zero tolerance policy. I'm not going to give in at all. Well, once you succumb even a little bit, now all of a sudden you are no longer controlling it. It is controlling you. You've allowed that Mitzrayim to become that much more real in your life. So certainly from the get-go, it is important when making these resolutions on heavy life issues to have a zero tolerance policy. That being so, we're human, we mess up, we have bad days, and it is important to say, I need to win the war, not the battle. And have a bad day, put it behind me. Tomorrow morning is a new day. Just because this happened yesterday, tomorrow is going to be a fresh start. And on the contrary, when a person does get down, get depressed about them giving in one time, we know how bad depression is and how that can lead to giving in many more times. So when you do mess up once or twice, the trick would be to put it behind you as quickly as possible and start up again the next day with renewed zeal and joy.
So each day when we wake up, we have to affirm that commitment. I have a comment from Gabrielle in the chat. I guess she's asking about the word karma. I don't know how you can reflect on that in this situation.
No, and if she wants to be a little bit more specific, it might be easier to
she says, if there is a karma, we do not know, but we know the result. And if the result has hurt, it must be wrong. Also wrong to myself, I will be hurt too. And she's from, I think, Germany, so her English is not, always perfect, but you got the idea, right?
Right. So there's a certain behavioral pattern that you don't know why it is doing this to you, but you see it leading in a negative direction. Is that accurate?
I think, in a way, I think maybe she's saying that we will see if you say karma is your soul energy, if there's harm to your soul energy, then in the material world we will also see some harm to self and others if we're not using that karma correctly. Maybe right. I'm not sure. Gabrielle, you're going to have to chat some more.
Definitely everything begins in the spiritual and then translates into the physical. And yeah, it is good to take note of what leads me to behave in a good way and what leads me in a bad way. What has a positive result, what has a negative result. That being so, one has to be objective here. And sometimes we might think something is a bad karma while in fact it is important for you to do. And the fact that it's led to obstacles, those obstacles are obstacles that need to be overcome. So it's very difficult to make black and white statements when it comes to these sort of behavioral patterns. That is why, for us Jews, we have a Torah, a manual, a compass that helps us. And if the Torah tells us something is right for us, that means it's right for us. And the obstacles that we have might just be obstacles that are in our way of achieving it. Other times we have to get the advice of a mentor, of someone else outside of us to have that objective opinion. I know for me that's very important. You can feel passionate about something. You can feel it's the right thing, good karma, bad karma. This is leading me in the good way or the bad way. Get that second opinion from someone that you trust, someone that you respect, because it is important to have that level of objectivity when it comes to these things.
Thank you.
So we're talking a lot about a change. I want to bring a quote, and Debbie, if you can go to the PowerPoint just a little bit later about the good times to change and the not so good times to change. There might be a few slides ahead.
Slide number 15 is...
We can start with this one, the one beforehand. In our soul, there's different energies. And in Kabbalah, in Jewish mysticism, it says we have a Netzach energy and a Hod energy. And Netzach literally means perseverance and change, fighting, ambition, competitiveness, that drive we have to overcome a challenge and change. And we also have an energy of Hod. And Hod literally means to acknowledge. I accept this is reality. I submit to it. I'm humble in front of it. And some people are more Netzach oriented. Some people are more Hod oriented. We know some people that are very ambitious, always needing the next challenge. Some people are very happy, always doing the same thing day in and day out, more Hod. We have both inside of us. And the trick is to know when to use what. When to use our Netzach and fight and overcome, and when to have our Hod and accept a reality. If you go to the next slide for a moment, a quote I really love. There are some things we can't change. Others we can, but need not. And then, of course, there are those things that we should change. So in life, there's three types. There's the facts that we cannot change. There's the things that we could, but maybe that's not the real issue here. And then there are those things that we should, and we should be working on it. But ever so often, the next slide continues, we spend our life trying or at least wishing to change those things that we cannot. Our parents, for instance, that is what it is. Let us submit to it. Let us accept it. Let us deal with it. That is a time to have Hod. Or another example would be someone else. Often we cannot change someone else, like we discussed earlier. So we have to have Hod on those areas of life we can change, the facts as well as other people. Sometimes we focus on changing those things that we should not. There's a real issue, and as someone mentioned earlier, we do change for the sake of change. Maybe if we move to another town, or we take another job, or we have plastic surgery, or we change external components inside of us, that will help. No. That's an area of life that, yeah, maybe we can change it, but that's not the real issue. And finally, the last quote on that slide. Sorry, one earlier. And we come to terms with those things that we should change. And we say, hey, that's just me. No. That's where we need the Netzach. Our anger and our jealousy, our bad habits and our addictions. Those are the areas of life that we can change. We can change ourselves. So Netzach is on changing ourselves, on our habits, on our opinions, our perspectives. The Hod, that's on the facts of life. That's on other people. So when to employ the Netzach and when to employ the Hod, that's important. And we have to realize when to use what.
This is very, very insightful, and I think that it is most difficult to say the least, that if I believe that I have a right to my opinion, I have the way that I do it is the only way that it needs to be and must be done. People will, even myself, I will say things to myself that hinder me from doing something that is the betterment for me, the betterment for my family, the betterment for my community. And still I give myself an excuse. Maybe that's what it is. I give myself an excuse, and everybody does, for one reason or another, or some rationalization, so that I don't have to make that change.
Absolutely.
And that's what I say. That's me. So
yeah.
how do we get past that?
Well, I think the mentor, going back to the question someone asked earlier about having that other objective person in your life, is this a that's me? Is this an excuse? Or is this really a reality that I should come to terms with? And you certainly have to think about it long and hard and see, is the answer I'm giving just in order to avoid something? Is it an excuse? Or is it really something I can't change? But when in doubt, really get the advice of a mentor, of an objective party. This applies across the board to everyone. I know how important that is to me in my life, getting the advice of someone I respect. So I know we're out of time here. Just to summarize the ideas we mentioned at the beginning, the things that get in the way of change can often be humility. We don't want to change. It's uncomfortable. It's like admitting you made a mistake. And to that, we must say, no, it's so beautiful. It shows we're human. It shows that we are always changing. We're dynamic. We're alive. They say that the way you can tell if a fish is alive or not if it can swim upstream against the current. So the ability to change is most human. Number two, we said it is within our ability to do that. That's what makes us created in the image of God. That's like Abraham was told, don't dictate yourself based on your DNA, based on your influences, based on your surroundings. So 1 and 2 is humility and knowing that I do have the ability to change, being able to pinpoint a Mitzrayim in my life, those things that are enslaving me. And then a few practical tips. If the inspiration is there, act on it right away. Also, at the beginning, have the zero tolerance policy. But when you do mess up, bounce back. Don't get down. And finally, at the end, when to have the netzach, when to have the hod. On yourself, you change. It's hard to change others. And finally, the story that we mentioned at the beginning. When we do change ourselves, we can affect our family, inspire a community, and then ultimately change the world.
It's been a wonderful, wonderful presentation, an hour together. And we welcome any comments or questions. You can write to Homeopathy World Community at Gmail, or you are Ask the Rabbi on Chabad.org. So there is a link on homeopathyworldcommunity.com where you can find, or if you want to provide any other contact information for folks.
Thank you so much for the opportunity today. I would very much like to hear from your listeners, any questions that they do have. If they want to email you afterwards, I'd be interested in seeing some of the comments that they have. But thank you again for the opportunity.
Okay. And one of the things that I admire is you are always very prompt on time, where I am lax on time. So there's a few more slides here, if you don't mind. Change through deed. People are not changed by arguments nor by philosophy. People change by doing. So it's all about action. The next one is introduce a new habit into your life, and your entire perspective of the world changes. And then more on action. First do, then learn about what you are already doing. So that's really interesting. And I want to thank everyone who has showed up for today's program in the chat, or if you're just listening and you're not on the chat, sharing Amnon for getting the lighting and the sound and everything going so beautifully. Gratitude is not only the greatest virtues, but the parent of all others. That is a quote from Cicero. Coming up next on the show, Dr. Deepak Sharma of the Orbits Clinic in New Delhi will be here next May 26th. Is that correct? On back pain and homeopathy. June 2 will be Jenny French talking about summer remedies. June 9th, Dr. Robert Bruck on glyphosate and kidney disease. And then I'm going to have a vacation. And June 23, Neera Andaharia is a yoga teacher and homeopath. She will be talking about how to move in our space. And you can always connect with us on many different places, on Facebook, on the website. And Wednesday, we have Blog Talk Radio with Alan Phillips talking about vaccinations and your rights. I speak at the last Wednesday of each month. I want to thank you, Rabbi Cotlar, for being with us and taking your precious time. I know that you have a very full schedule every day, and we appreciate this inspiration. And so I hope it makes a change in people's lives. Go ahead.
Thank you for the honor.
Sending out waves of love and change to everyone. Until next time. Bye-bye.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. Our weekly lineup of call-in programs includes Computers 2K Now with Amnon Nissan, Health In with Debbie Bruck, Breaking Free with Marilyn Shannon, Lessons of Vietnam with NCVVI members, The Tanya Love Show, Reawaken Your Brilliance with Julie Seibert, and if you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it at www.nissancommunications.com. Sponsored by Atomus.com, makers of quality video recorders and converters for professionals. ThatVidBlasterGuy.com, CarolinaApparel.com, and DeltaForce.net.